my only take is I really can't die before this podcast gets syndicated. So that's the only thing that I have to say about the coronavirus.
LawFlip, objection, Your Honor. Turn the game upside down. LawFlip, objection, Your Honor. Turn the game upside down.
Welcome to LawFlip. This is a conversation about law, life, cannabis, and everything in between. I have my co-host here, Benowitz.
Marhaban.
And our guests both left big corporate legal jobs to start a firm together. What else do they have in common? They're married. And what type of law does this nice Jewish couple specialize in? Cannabis. What would Bubby and Zadie think?
Bubby and Zadie would ask, are you making money?
Yes.
Bubby and Zadie would want free samples.
Yes. Bubby and Zadie know to ask the right questions. So we'll discuss it all today. Please email, Slack, text all your friends that need inspiration and to be lightened up a little bit. Maybe they need to relax a little bit with some discussion about cannabis. Check out this episode, okay? Voice your opinion on what you hear today. Let's flip the game upside down. So we are very excited to be having Brian and Polina Ross on. They're experienced litigators. They actually do something that very few attorneys do. They do both litigation, they go to court, and they do transactional work. They do a lot of things, but here today, we're going to talk about cannabis. So let's talk about how you both started off at big legal jobs and you started your own firm. Why'd you do it? Why'd you start your own firm?
Basically, I wanted to have freedom to be able to choose my clients, freedom to have my own schedule, freedom to be able to have control over my career. And that's why I decided to do it.
What pushed you over the edge? What gave you the confidence to know that you can do it?
Honestly, you just kind of have to jump because you don't have 20/20 foresight. So you just have confidence in your ability and know that you have a history of doing good work and that it will continue on your own. And you just jump and hope for the best and keep working.
So Brian, how'd you decide to get into cannabis?
Yeah, so I had about a decade in law firms, about a decade in-house at 3 different tech companies. And I joined up with Polina a few years ago. And right out the gate, I was working with my tech clients because that's what I've been doing for 20 years. But cannabis companies started coming to me and talking to me. And I grew up in the Valley. I know some of these people. But I quickly realized when you get past the regulatory issues and the legal issues, and we'll talk about some of that, you're just dealing with companies that are trying to do the right thing and grow and thrive. And at the end of the day, they have the same challenges, whether it's starting up their company, whether it's, contracts, intellectual property, employment, whatever it is. So we started working on it and it started getting critical mass. Now it's about half the practice.
That's amazing. So what type of, if any, trepidation did you have before getting into this area of this practice area?
Trepidation. I wasn't so concerned personally that I was going to have a problem as a licensed lawyer just working with cannabis clients, although I did look into the ethical stuff.
What about like peers? And, oh, they're in cannabis. That's crazy.
No, everyone thought it was really cool.
I think it's cool.
All my friends pushed me toward it because they had friends who did this company and friends working there, and everyone was introducing me to people, and it started steamrolling.
So it wasn't the type of thing like where you were afraid to show up at school. Oh, they're the cannabis lawyers. That's crazy.
No, not at all. I mean,
how woke are we in 2020? This is amazing.
In San Fernando Valley, we're like the cool kids.
But I'll tell you, the other thing is coming out of being a 20-year lawyer in tech and new media and that kind of thing, I just humbled myself and I said, this is a new area, a new industry. I don't fully know the players. I don't know all the issues. I joined up as an of counsel with a firm that specialized in cannabis so I could get involved in the deal flow and start to learn this inside out and learn the players.
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
Okay, so who are the players?
Who are the players? Well, when you talk about people in the industry making it happen, I see like 3 groups of people. I see the true believers in the plant who really believe in it as a cure-all.
The plant man.
The plant, I see a group of people who have been in the underground, the illicit market. They kind of wear a pirate flag and they're used to doing things a certain way.
I like me weed.
Right. And it's worked. And there's a little stubborn resistance to change there. And then the third big group of people is the sophisticated business money that's coming in, right?
Mm-hmm.
The people who are quitting the big law firms and the big companies to go be on these boards and to work in the C-suite of these companies. So how are these 3 populations going to ultimately shake out and interact? It's a rocky road right now.
And then what type of businesses are there? So we know there's obviously selling of the plant, but what are the different types of businesses that we have?
It really breaks down into two camps. You have plant touching businesses and then everything else, which is kind of called ancillary. Plant touching is any business that handles cannabis. It takes title to the plant. That can be the grower. That can be the manufacturer who turns it into oil or products, the distributor, middleman who has to get it tested and transported to retailers. And then you have the dispensaries, the delivery services, the testing labs. Those are all the people who handle cannabis. So they have special regulations and issues they have to deal with. Then all the ancillary companies are people you might not think about. Yeah, there's people who sell grow lights. There's people who are landlords, rent you your building. There's software platforms, right? There's accountants, lawyers, everything.
Wow. And then what are the really main business and legal issues that you see arise like on a day-to-day basis?
Over and over, the biggest issues are around, the business issues are around banking, being able to get and keep a bank account because of the federal law issues. It's very difficult. Taxes is a big hurdle for these companies. We can talk about that. Regulatory compliance. Obviously, if you have a cannabis license, you want to do what you can to protect that and play by the rules.
What do we do? So banking, yeah. What's the challenge? How do we overcome it?
The challenge is it's a federally illegal substance, marijuana. So banks today are very concerned about working with cannabis companies. Some will, and a lot of it is state level credit unions instead of the big national banks. But there are big banks that will work with these customers. And there's some guidance out there from the feds about how you do it. And a lot of it involves filing paperwork every time there's a transaction. But this means the banks have to staff up. They have to get another regulator in there, at a desk. And so they end up charging the companies 3%, 4%, 5% a month just for the privilege of having a basic checking account.
So now sticking on this business front for a second. So how long do you see it being before buying pot at the dispensary with a credit card becomes a commonplace thing?
Look, it happens. There are definitely dispensaries that get credit card accounts, but right now there's no merchant code for cannabis. So they're all doing it under pretenses. And so they'll have a credit card account. It'll get shut down. They'll go and open up another one. They jump from lily pad to lily pad. A lot of them also do debits, right? So they'll do like a cashless ATM transaction. So you go up to the counter, you buy $27 worth of gummies. What they do is they take you, say, go over to the ATM, pull out $30. You don't get $30 in cash. It just goes right to their register. They give you $3 in change and your gummies. And all that the bank knows is that an ATM transaction happened for $30, and it's probably at a place that doesn't have the name 420 Green in it. And they go along until they hopefully get caught or don't get caught. And there are companies that have debit card solutions. I know some friends who founded some, and they're geared toward the industry, and they work legitimately with banks. But to answer your question, it's very case by case.
Interesting. Now, taxes.
Yeah. So obviously I'd imagine the tax issues for ancillary businesses that don't touch the plant are less complicated, but how would a company that's growing and selling cannabis deal with just the basics of being able to deduct their expenses like every other business that spends money to make a product?
Hire a good accountant.
Yes, you have to find an accountant who understands this industry, because at the federal level, the income tax level, you have that section of the tax code. And this happened back in the 80s. There was a guy who was selling massive amounts of cocaine, and he had the big mansion by the water and the speedboats. And then he wanted to deduct his business expenses because, legal or not legal, you got to pay your taxes. That's why Al Capone went to jail, right? Tax evasion. If you pay your taxes, at least the IRS leaves you alone. But this guy said, well, all the cost, that goes into making my drugs, I get to deduct it. And the tax court agreed with him. And Congress was so upset, they passed this section of the tax code. And they didn't think about a cannabis industry 30 years later, but here we are. And the government uses this provision to say, if you're in the cannabis business, you cannot deduct business expenses.
That's fascinating. And then what about like the distinction between California law and federal law? I think everybody's so confused. Can you enlighten the people? It's legal in California. It's not legal federally. How should we think about pot?
Well, it is very confusing because as a lawyer, you are, bound to uphold the law. And so there's this dichotomy where it's illegal on the federal level, but it's legal on the state level. So how do you reconcile it? So Brian can continue.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different elements there. One is ethics, right? And different ethics state boards have talked about this already. And the California State Bar is working on their opinion too. What it comes down to is you get a client in the cannabis industry, you tell them up front, early and often, hey, this is illegal federally. So I'm not going to do anything to help you violate federal law. And I just want you to know if there's a problem federally, this is what can happen to you. A, B, C, D. Here's all the issues. That said, I'm here to help you comply with state law and local law. And I'll do that to the best of my ability. And under most situations, we'll be able to have attorney-client privilege because California has laws that protect that, especially with cannabis. But at a federal level, you could get into some dicey scenarios where you lose the privilege.
What's the worst way you've seen it play out where you're advising, or you've seen, whether it be your client or another person, where they're complying with California law, but the federal agents came in and caused some havoc? We
had a client that was, being prosecuted at the state level, but I have not personally, I've been maybe fortunate or not. There's some warriors who've been in the game for, 10, 20 years. And back then in the day, before we had this industry, the main thing that cannabis companies were worried about was criminal defense, right? Mm-hmm. That's the only reason they called a lawyer. They didn't care about corporate, this or that. So I came in 4 years ago at the point past when most of that was really happening. So knock on wood, I haven't, gotten that midnight call.
Also raid. Yeah. That's amazing.
On a similar note, so with attorney-client privilege, are you aware of any lawyers who've been compelled to testify by a federal court over a cannabis issue? Because theoretically, the privilege is going to apply in state law, going to apply in state court, but the crime fraud exception, if a federal prosecutor were super zealous, have you encountered any practitioners have to face that nightmare yet?
Well, they have to prove a burden. They have to first establish that there was a crime being committed. And so once they establish that, then I'm not a criminal attorney, but then they can certainly use that initial accusation to go after the records. And I'm sure they're going to petition the court and ask for those records on the grounds that they are committing a crime and they're encouraging their client to commit a crime.
So the pro-legalization argument, or at least one of them, has always been, you make it legal, all the problems will go away. Does that really come to fruition?
Well, it's a good idea in theory. It's how you go about doing it, right? We talk about legalization. We don't really have legalization today. We have illegal federal. We have legal for medical in 34 states. We have legal for adult use, rec, retail, in 11 states. It's probably going to change by the end of the year, but we're still not going to have federal legalization for a while, probably. So when you talk about legalization, some people talk about decriminalization, which is we're just not going to throw you in jail, but we're not exactly legalizing it. And then in places where they talk about legalization, it's not as if anyone can just go open up a weed store on the corner. You have to jump through massive hoops, heavy regulations. There's actually a lot of barriers to entry now to get into the space. So as a result, you see a lot of people who've been in the space for many years just giving up or going back into the black market. Or a lot of companies are keeping one foot in the black market while they have their license. So stuff is going out the back door, and it's an unspoken kind of dirty secret in the industry, but sometimes it's the only way they can stay alive.
And then one of the ways to get into business is you got to have a place to operate. So, correct. Okay, so now you're a landlord or you're a tenant. What are the concerns? What are the main issues you face as a landlord? What are the main issues you face as a tenant?
Well, because you're operating illegally, that is your main issue. So one of the things you really want to have in there are escape clauses. For the landlord, you want to be able to have an escape clause in order for him to terminate the lease in the event that there's some sort of criminal or civil you get an indication that there's going to be some sort of asset forfeiture, and you want to be able to terminate the lease without notice. Same thing for the tenant. They also want an escape clause, but for them, because there are so many barriers to obtaining a license, they want to be able to break the lease in the event they are not able to obtain the license. Some other barriers are a lot of times these landlords don't own these buildings outright, so they have a mortgage. So if they allow a cannabis tenant in there, then they're in violation of their mortgage. And so what do you do with that? So, the
bank could call the loan and just
the bank will call the loan. So there's different ways to negotiate the lease to make sure that the landlord and both the tenant at that time are protected, where you go and you find a hard money loan and then you have the tenant pay the difference.
So there's so many different ways that the law will affect all of these different versions of the cannabis business. How does it affect the bigger stuff like mergers and acquisitions?
It does. It complicates mergers and acquisitions in some ways because cannabis is very hyper-local. You have to look, when you're looking at the laws or the situation, you start at the local city or county level, figure out what their ordinance, what's going on in that city, and then you look at the relevant state law, And it's different state by state. In California alone, we have 450 plus jurisdictions. Each has their own rules. Some say no altogether. Some say yes altogether. They all regulate it differently. So in the M&A situation, you have to look at, first off, what is a valuable asset here? Maybe there's inventory. Maybe there's goodwill in your brand. Maybe the valuable asset for you is a location and a license, right? The license is the beating heart of the business for the cannabis business. But you can't transfer a license under state law. So you have to find a way to structure the deal so that you transfer ownership of the company that holds the license. And you do it in stages, getting regulatory approval along the way.
Aren't those deals going to be scrutinized heavily and say, look, you're really just paying for the transfer of the license. You're not really transferring the IP. There is no IP. This is really a transfer of the license.
It really depends on the deal. I mean, there's legitimately IP if you've developed, a customer-facing brand. If you're a dispensary that's well known, you have a lot of traffic, and if you have somewhere else in the supply chain, you have a vape pen brand, whatever.
Is there a state and federal divide on trademark and copyright laws applied to cannabis?
Yeah, copyright is not really an issue. Trademark, there is. At the federal level, they don't let you trademark. They don't let you register trademarks for illegal activity. So what do people do? They have a cannabis company. A lot of them, they have a trademark they use in commerce. They have built up common law rights. But when you get a registration certificate, it unlocks a lot of other benefits for you in court, right? So how do you get that? Well, they have strategies. They'll sell hoodies. They'll sell hats. And they'll get that trademarked. Or they'll sell a non-cannabis version of their vape product or their edible chocolate, just enough to kind of get the trademark. And then hopefully when legalization comes down the road, they'll be able to expand their mark into cannabis. At the state level, it depends state by state. California will let you trademark for cannabis because we have state laws that support it.
With all these challenges, I've seen, recent rumbles that even the big dogs like MedMen and some of these other companies, this thought that, the pot business is going bust. Is there any thought to, what do we think? What do we think of the state of affairs?
Well, look, 2019 was a terrible year for cannabis stocks. There's no doubt. Capital has dried up. A lot of the easy money has gone away, and the smart money is kind of sitting on the sidelines right now, waiting to see where they want to invest next. But you're going to see probably a lot of companies going under this year.
How are they going to handle that with how bankruptcy applies to cannabis?
Yeah, well, you can't go to bankruptcy court when you're a cannabis company because that's federal law. That's federal court. They'll kick you out. So what you got to do is find a way to do maybe an unsupervised, dissolution of the business, or maybe find a way to install a receiver who's properly, authorized to handle the cannabis assets and run the business.
Or perhaps get an investor on board to ride out the wave. So there's different opportunities. In fact, there's a lot of cannabis businesses who are struggling right now, and a lot of investors are using this opportunity to go after these like dying businesses and trying to, get at a discount, buy at a discount.
So what's the future of cannabis?
The future is bright. I mean, this industry is growing, 30% year over year still, right? It's a $14 billion industry estimated today, legal part of it. The illegal part is, let's say, $50 billion. They're expecting $45 billion industry, just THC alone, by, 2024. And the CBD, the hemp, we haven't even talked about that. That's maybe 10, 20, 50 times bigger.
We've heard a lot about what you guys have done. I want to know, and I always ask, how do we avoid being a miserable lawyer? Is it cannabis?
Honestly, you do what you want to do. You pick an area of law that you enjoy, and if you want to hire a partner, if you want to work with someone, work with someone who you like, who you enjoy spending time with, who supports you. And
look at that. You found one in your husband.
Yeah. So it's true.
What do you guys do on a day-to-day basis? What are some of the foundational things that you do that keep you happy, motivated, excited, ready to go?
Well, there's everything. There's taking care of yourself. There's meditation. There's food. There's exercise. There's being with our kids. It's our priority, and our dogs, and the whole thing. I mean, friends. Just have a good life, good balanced life.
Right. And I think ultimately you start the day with a certain energy. Instead of looking at whatever issues you are facing in your work as insurmountable, you look at it as a challenge that you want to undertake, because at the end of that hill, when you are able to go there, the satisfaction of being able to resolve that problem, resolve the issue is fantastic. So you just it's also a huge mindset, how you look at the day and how you look at the challenges. So your mindset certainly affects your approach to both our work and to our life.
Love it. Let's talk about how the coronavirus might affect cannabis. Now, if you really want to get the pulse of what's happening here in Los Angeles, there's only one place to turn. Do you guys know where that is? You guys probably don't know what I'm talking about. It's called LA Mommies. It's a Facebook group. And you would think, what do you know about LA Mommies, Benjy? Well, non-mommies are allowed to join the group. And really, it's crazy. It's a crazy thing. If you really want to get a pulse of what's going on, you turn to LA Mommies. And right now, what's hot in this group is the coronavirus.
Wait, so is LA Mommies the new Nextdoor app?
Yes. It's better than Nextdoor. They know things before Nextdoor knows.
It's unbelievable. I do research. Instead of going to Westlaw, I go to LA Mommies.
100%.
That's where you find it. And if they're on fire over it, that means it's time to take it seriously. So these mommies need to relax. So how is their cannabis going to be affected by corona?
They need to take a little more, maybe. I mean, listen, we're not part of the CDC. We don't know what's going out there, what's going on. All we can do is, take in the news reports, hear what's going on. You just have to protect your kids the way you always do, because if you become too vigilant, too crazy, then I think that's a huge disservice as well.
How is it affecting the actual weed business?
I mean, there's a couple dimensions, right? One is, for me, I've seen some clients already having their supply chain disruptions or delays because they get parts or components from China.
Corona is messing with our weed now?
Corona is messing with our vapes, that's right, and our batteries and our pods. Corona is also something that comes up when you have a contract with somebody and they say they can't perform. You look at, it's what's called force majeure at the back of the contract. And it's usually, hey, something out of our control. We couldn't help it, so we're not in breach of this contract. There's also other issues when you run a company. You have to think about, as an employer, what do I do to protect my workplace? The CDC has given some guidance. OSHA has given some guidance. What if an employee calls in sick? Or do I have my sick policy in line? What if other company employees are concerned about exposure?
Yeah, Lou, what's going to happen? What's going to happen with the employment issues surrounding, like, when people have to start missing work due to the coronavirus?
Well, it's going to depend on how reasonable or unreasonable the employer is and what compliance measures the employer has in place.
My only take is, I really can't die before this podcast gets syndicated. So that's the only thing that I have to say about the coronavirus. Polina, what is your deal of the week?
Embrace the struggle. It's part of that mindset where we all struggle in our daily lives. Instead of shying away from it, just embrace it and just hit it head on. Just embrace that struggle.
I love that, Polina. Brian, what's your deal of the week?
Take care of yourself. No carbs, no grain. Get to the gym. Get some sleep.
Love it. That's a great deal of the week. Lewis, what's your deal of the week?
Vote. It's 2020 and you're going to have a chance to get a new president, or you have a chance to keep the current one. I don't know why you'd possibly want to do that, but either way, it's your right. Plus, if you want to get rid of bad laws and bad judges, vote for people who will actually do that and make things better.
Love that, Lewis. My deal of the week is go check out the New York Times, the coronavirus live updates. You could see the disruptions, the rising cases, the warnings. It's wild on there, man. If you want to get scared, which it's kind of fun to roam around in that territory, go check out this New York Times live thing. And then, I'm not talking about me, but you may want to go to one of Brian or Paulina's clients and get a little bit of cannabis to relax. So we are moving on to legal tip of the week. We have an awesome firm, Smith & Benowitz, it's us, that sponsors this legal tip of the week. We do personal injury, we do employment, we do class actions. What's your legal tip of the week, Lewis?
This is an oldie, but it bears repeating. Weed and work do not mix, even if you have a doctor's note. it's really unfortunate that something that people find medically and mentally beneficial, that's fairly benign, all things considered, can get you fired. But we still live in a reality here in California where your boss can fire you for engaging in what's legal conduct under state law. So be careful, knowing that your voluntary choices in your free time could have employment consequences.
Fair. My legal tip of the week is the weed game is wild. So there's a lot of cash flowing around. And if you're an employee and you're getting paid in cash and you work in the cannabis industry, or there's other shady activity going on, you may have a claim and you may want to call us. Polina, what's your legal tip of the week?
If you're a landlord and you're a sophisticated landlord and you've been leasing out to tenants for years and years, and all of a sudden you get a cannabis client, do not use that template form lease, because that will not work for your cannabis clients. Make sure you hire an attorney who can go through that lease to make sure that you're protected.
Excellent. Brian, what's your legal tip of the week?
Get it on paper. You've been in the weed game. You're used to doing things with handshakes. You're used to being with bros. You're used to doing a one-pager. I don't want to over-lawyer it for you, but please, let's get it in writing. Just take the time. Let's get it right.
I love that one. So we all know it's scary when you sign up for a subscription and the trial period requires your credit card.
The only thing that's scarier is being quarantined in the international terminal at the airport because of the coronavirus.
Wouldn't it be great if you never had to submit your actual number, or you could block the merchant from charging you until you've approved it?
That's how it should be.
Well, Lewis, that's how it is. With Rock Paper, you create a proxy credit card on demand that's linked to your actual credit card or debit card. The merchant can only charge you when you say so, and you don't have to give your actual credit card number to another third party. It's that simple.
That sounds like a no-brainer.
Agreed. In fact, I moved all of our subscriptions over to Rock Paper. It's amazing. It's a life changer. Go to rockpaper.com. It's rockpaper.com. Spend wisely. Join the movement. Let's go. Ryan, Polina, it's been incredible. I feel higher already. I just feel like I'm a higher plane right now. Tell us where we could find you.
Well, you go to www. Start with that. Then you go.
I feel really high right now.
Then you go Ross Legal Corp. That's CORP. RossLegalCorp.com.
Okay.
Everything you need to know right there.
Okay, so this is what we learned today. We learned that Bubby and Zadie only care if you're bringing home the money. If you're in cannabis, it doesn't really make a difference. They want a little bit of a taste. They want a little bit of money. They want you to thrive. The cannabis is going nowhere. Some of the bigger companies are having a tough time, but they're making a comeback, and cannabis has a big, bright future. We have able, great attorneys who are ready to bring you through all your cannabis challenges right here. You can call them anytime. And I want you to just take a deep breath of either air or cannabis and chill out for the rest of this week and just thrive. We'll see you next week.
LawFlip, objection, Your Honor. Turn the game upside down. LawFlip, objection, Your Honor. Turn the game upside down.
Okay, so Arian, they're asking where they could find us. So for LawFlip, it's at LawFlip and LawFlip.com. For Smith & Benowitz, our law firm, which does personal injury employment and class actions, you can find us at Smith Benowitz and SmithBenowitz.com. For the personal stuff, like where you're really going to find the juicy stuff, at Benjy Smith and BenjySmith.com. At Wages Guru and LewisBenowitz.com for Lewis. Oh, so LawFlip is produced, directed, and edited by the young legend Arian Tabibian. Visual effects and compositions by another young legend, Oren Azad. Intro music provided by Pen Practice. Pen Practice, what is it? Premium instrumentals for upcoming artists by the music industry's top producers. For more info, visit penpracticemusic.com. I had so much fun recording the intro song with my man Hilton Deuce Wright. Looking forward to hearing more and more from Pen Practice. So the LawFlip identity, this hot logo that you're looking at, created by Garret, Whisten, and Travis Nagle. Special thank you to Shai and Seth from the Horwitz Marketing Agency. A huge thank you to Aaron and Vanessa from Smith & Benowitz for endlessly dealing with all of our podcast bullshit. And lastly,
A huge thank you to our beautiful wives, Julie and Lisa, for supporting our vision, and all the love to all of our 4 boys combined. Disclaimer, this podcast is made available by Smith & Benowitz for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is only intended to provide general information and opinions about legal and other concepts, and is not intended to be used as a source of legal advice or relied on for legal advice. By listening to this podcast, you understand that no attorney-client relationship is being formed between you and Smith & Benowitz or any of its attorneys. This podcast should not be used as a substitute for competent legal advice from a licensed professional attorney in your state.